Let's start by planning for the first session and all the different activities that you need to do for you, because it may be that in school you've been taught that you shouldn't plan for a session, that you should go in as a blank slate and be able to experience the family as they are along the way. That is important. You have to be very open to the family and being open to understanding and feeling different things about them, because it will give you the richness and the context for how they work. However, there's a significant amount that you can do to prepare yourself to be ready to help them immediately, rather than having to wait a number of sessions and a number of weeks before you get your feet on the ground. FFTs begin with an intake assessment. That intake assessment looks broadly and multisystemically at the needs of the family, both in terms of practical needs that we may be able to help with in regard to case management activities, and the way in which the family functions together. In addition, at the intake, there are a number of measures given about family functioning, individual functioning, so that we can understand not only how the individuals work, but the way in which those individuals come together and the risk that they may pose to family safety. What happens is that after that intake, you get the case. It's assigned to you in the Care4 system. When you get the case, you'll have the opportunity to read through all of the intake material. You'll have the opportunity in a very easy way to see all the intake information. And what your job will be is to take that information and complete a session plan before you see the family. In that session plan, it will integrate information from the intake and bring it right to in front of you. So you'll have it right there, so that you can think through plans that you may need to make in regard to either case management or within family change activities. There, they get a full course of FFT along with intensive case management. You have to think differently about treatment. And you have to, in order to do FFT well, remember that FFT is purposeful practice. As a purposeful practice, it means that you intervene for a particular outcome. And that takes thoughtful planning. That takes good feedback from the client in order to be able to do that. So the core nature of FFT is purposeful planning and purposeful practice. And in all the versions of FFT, as we said before, it means that you have three tools to use. You have a set of lenses to look through. You have a map to follow, and we have some principles that allow you to be artistic and use your own creativity in applying the model to the differences and the unique variations in families. Again, a family focus for a lens, a model for a map, and art that incorporates evidence-based treatment planning so that you can come up with creative solutions along the way. FFT is a map. It's a relational pathway to change. And like other maps, as I've said before, it goes up, down, and around as it manages and tries to adjust to the contour of the context. In this particular case, family therapy, the context is the functioning of the family. And so the pathway, the model, has to wrap around that functioning and grab a family, engage them, take them through the different pathways of change. Now in FFT, of course, it's the three phases of treatment that we bring, or the model brings to the table for families to follow in their change process. This doesn't determine what they do. This doesn't determine how they do it. This is just the phases through which they go that will increase the likelihood of them being successful at changing the particular and specific things within their family that they want. We've talked a lot about how problems are really very solvable. In fact, in families, there's very few problems that are not solvable. The difficulty is not the solution, or coming up with a solution, or identifying a particular thing that they could do. The real challenge is to get them to do that, get them unstuck, and get them to get beyond the kinds of things that have collected around this problem over time. So the point here is that problems are solvable, but the challenge is in helping them learn to work together, given, as we particularly at FFT say, given all that they've brought to the table, or all that's behind the particular problem. Problems occur when relationships get stuck. What that means is that relationships are stuck and they can't respond in a creative way to what it takes to solve this one. So it's in what they think about it, it's in what they do about it, and it's in how they get stuck in maintaining it. By helping families work together, we help them become more stable. By helping them become more stable, we improve the outcomes of FFT. So you are helping them learn to manage things on their own, so it increases family stability. Now, clinical problems, as we've talked about before, comes from this fact that they got stuck. Something happened along the way. It was a problem that they didn't solve particularly well. It grew over time, a bit like the pebble in the shoe metaphor. Now it's become a very central part of how they work. Problems exist in many places. The challenge that the family has in meeting their requirements, for example, from a child welfare system or a justice system, the meaning they put on things, the patterns, the functions, and they can get very stuck in the fact that they have practical needs that any family needs to just manage each day, and they don't have those. So problems can exist in all those areas. And as a result, they are stuck, so to speak, in terms of coming up with something. That says our job around a clinical problem is not to fix it for them, but to get them unstuck so that they can. Now, you know that in FFT, the lens of thinking about a problem is particularly important. It's a systemic lens. It's a lens that looks at how families function, and this lens has a function of its own. The function of this lens is to give you a way of thinking about the problem that will help you do treatment better. First, what's the history that influences how they work? That's an important part of understanding a problem. Now, notice what we have here is the history that influences how they work together, much broader than just around a single problem. Number two, what are the risk and protective factors in the context today, not in the past, but today, that help contribute to them getting stuck, or are potential things that we could rely on to get them unstuck? Number three, are there urgent, required, practical needs that they have? It's just like Maslow's hierarchy of basic needs. If families are having trouble with food, they're not going to be able to focus intently and in the way in which we want them to on changing the behavior of each of them within the family. Let's help them with practical needs at first so that they can be able to take what we have to offer and be able to benefit from that. Remember, think about the pattern between them. Every behavior, the first question you should ask yourself is, how does this relate to other people? What came before it? What came after it? How does it work? When you say to yourself around a problem, how does it work? And you look at everybody involved, you're taking a family relational pattern view. What's the meaning they make of things? And as you know by now, we put that into the category of problem definitions and functions in regard to what glues those together. Again, a problem definition is just the belief that an individual person has about the behavior. And the struggle is that everybody in the family could have different ideas about that. Therefore, they're not on the same page, and they're working actually in an interesting way on different problems that they're trying to solve. Number six, all this gets glued together, as you know, patterns, meanings, all of it into relational functions. And it's like our attachment version for FFT. It is what glues them together. Remember, identifying relational functions is a thing that you want to do to match to, not to change. So the idea is if you match to relational functions with the activities in FFT, that the family is more likely to be successful. We're looking at a multi-systemic view of the problem in FFT. Remember, there's culture context all around the family. That has to do with religion and ethnicity in the community, peer relations, school relations, all of those things that are a big umbrella under which the family operates. Also important, there's a context and a problem history. Things have happened before we've come to them. Those things provide the meaning for why each individual may believe and may think and may feel what they do about the issue. Within that context are the three core elements of how a family works: patterns, the meanings they put on things, and the functions that glue them together. This is the picture that I carry with me as I get ready to walk into a session. This lens helps me simplify things and keep things in order so that I don't get lost in the content, but I can focus on the relational process between the family members. All along the way, this unit of three things, functions, meaning, and pattern, moves through time, and the time that it moves through from a family perspective is how the family's developmental status works. Remember how this works. Each person in the family brings to the table, so to speak, past experiences. These past experiences are things that occurred around the particular problem with the people in the family, and they predispose the family member to think in particular ways about things. If you think, for example, that your child is disrespectful, you're likely to come to the table with that general belief about them and put many things they do today or in a current context into that belief. Everybody brings these things to the table. And the way we think about them is that what lays on top of what people bring to the table is what we call the problem definition. So each person in the family brings something to the table, and they create a problem definition from what they bring to the table and what's going on now. It is upon that problem definition that they're actually acting, not necessarily on what the other person intended, not necessarily on what the other person believes, not even necessarily on what the other person tried to do. So problem definition is an important filter for people that we need, and we're able to touch and change through some of the interventions in FFT. Preparing involves planning. That planning can occur in individual or in collaborative team planning processes. But the point is that you have to have a plan before you go to the session. And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is the model brings a pathway of change. So it's not that you need to see what's up with the family to know what that will be. You'll always begin with engagement motivation. You'll always begin with reducing blame and activity through reframing. So you already have a plan. The point at this time is to be able to pull that plan together with the needs of the family from the intake and other things. First of all, you'll need to have a specific understanding of the reason for the referral. It is important to know why they came. That's the least a family can expect from us, is to know why they're there and what role everybody has in that problem. You want to take a multi-systemic view. You want to identify both strengths and challenges, both the risk factors and the protective factors at all levels of how the family works. The family, the community, their education, individual and practical needs. You can look through the intake information and make some good decisions about areas that they'll need. You need to think about who to involve and who should attend. Remember, from an FFT perspective, we want all of the major players to attend. Is that grandma? Is that an auntie? That depends, and you have to look at the information about the family and make your best judgment, and then you can vary this as you move forward. You want to begin to frame the case in your own mind before you get to the session. Now, the reason I say this is because once you get to the session, you're going to be overwhelmed by the emotional and the behavioral things that go on between this complicated group of people. If you do good planning at the beginning, it helps you frame the case so that you're able to enter that session better prepared. And what framing the case is to take the intake information and the initial presenting concern and make some guesses about core reframes for the caretaker and the family that you may use in the first session. These things, of course, will go round and around and around as you build them, but they're an initial starting point. And we'll give you a number of them in the case plan so that you'll be able to be prepared when you walked in about how to get a good start. What are the most important session goals? Every goal of every phase is not always important for every session. You have to prioritize your phase goals, and that's what the progress note helps you do. It will ask you to identify what you believe to be the most important goal for the next session. Now, it's important to note, every goal should not always be important. It is okay to have only certain ones, because that illustrates how you're being able to match what you do specifically to the family. You want to ask yourself, what more do I need to know? Are there things I need to ask about? Is there information I need to get? Are there additional assessments about people that I have to make? You want to think about what content areas you'll talk about. Go in ready to be able to speak about and understand and bring up the most difficult struggles between them from the very beginning. What's the core content that you want to talk about? And I can suggest to you, this needs to be related to the presenting issue, not something broad and general and just strength-based. Think about it. Families come to see you, they're looking to feel as if what you talk about with them is relevant to them, meaning that what you talk about with them is what's important to their life. What's important to their life when they first come in is not their relational process. That is not what they see in the foreground of their life. What's the most important thing are the struggles they're having. You are strength-based if you let them speak of the important, relevant struggles and you respond in strength-based ways. Strength-based does not mean that the session is only about positive things. The case plan is something you'll initially complete before you even go to see the family. The case plan is a dynamic document in FFT, meaning that you get it a start before the first session and then you update it at each of the phases. And the case plan is intended to identify the family challenges and needs, mental health challenges, behavioral challenges, educational ones, legal issues, additional areas of need, whether they be medical or permanency, transportation needs. And then finally, from those needs, we're going to help you identify an initial session plan. Notice the case plan, it is intended to be a funnel, starting with needs and ending up with a case plan and then an initial session plan. The session plan is integrated into the FFT Care4 system. Following the case plan, things from intake will automatically load in. Your ideas that you put there will then appear in progress notes to the future. You're able to come back to the case plan and update it at each phase change. The very end of the case plan is a first session plan. The idea here is that you take everything you've distilled from the case so far in thinking about the big picture and boil it down into what will you do the first time you see them. And this is really intended to help you have a theme hint or some ideas about how you can frame the problem so you can quickly respond and be therapeutic from the beginning. Many, many times, thinking about what you're going to do in the session really helps you get ready. And I even go so far as to almost play a movie in my head after I know the family. What are they going to come in like? What are they going to present like? How might I respond to that? But having a good idea about a theme before the session will help you get a good start and make treatment go quickly and help engage the family better. As you move through the session, you can think about what needs to be added to these initial ideas for reframing and themes. And each time you use the theme in each subsequent session, the idea is to fine-tune the theme until it gets closer and closer to fitting the family. There's a number of core reframes for starting a first session. For example, y'all didn't really choose to be in this therapy. You came through the referral source. I understand that a lot's happened to all of you, and you probably have very different ideas and feelings about what happened. My guess is that all of you want things to be in a better place, even though you're not sure anymore what that would look like. It's important for us to find ways to talk about what's going on between all of you and the strong emotions and the fact that each of you have many things behind your behavior. We all know that it's very easy to misunderstand each other. We also know that you haven't yet been able to find the words to talk about what goes on between you so that you can work it out. This is what I'm here for. I'm here to help you figure out how to put things in order so that you can work things out by yourself together. Now notice, each of these ideas gets you a real family-focused beginning. They're not specific. They fit lots of different families, but they help you organize and keep your responses focused on the relational process in a family-focused way. Once you begin with initial core theme, the idea would be based upon what you saw in the intake interview. Maybe you want to also include some ideas about things that specifically speak to their problem. So for example, in a family where you see in the intake there's been a significant trauma background, you may use this. When someone makes a mistake, like a youth, that's really a fight or flight response. And the difficulty here is that what happens is that people around the traumatized person take those individual struggles personally, and they feel hurt and they feel like their expectations are not being met. If there's a lack of hope, you may say, all have tried a lot of different things and feel tired and almost like wanting to give up. Almost giving up because of feeling hurt and fear is too much. So giving up is like protecting yourself, and maybe you'll still remember being in a better place together, or maybe even that it's just hard. Protecting yourself isn't a bad thing to do, and it helps. And at the same time, it's too bad you're all protecting each other, and it's difficult for you to see what's important to each other. I understand that you don't feel it now, and at the same time, I'm going to really work hard for you to help figure out what gets in the way. It may be when a youth returns from placement and it feels like there's no problem or there's silence. Coming to live together again, how unsure about how things will work out. everybody's protecting their hurt feelings and the feelings from the past events. The lack of trust comes from what happened. Trust has to be restored for everybody, and it comes from trying together again. Youth or parents don't participate, or they're being silent. Doesn't mean that you don't feel responsible. You could want to protect the situation by not wanting to escalate, or feel stuck in the middle and you don't want to choose. The youth maybe has learned to cope by relying on themselves, and this has really helped them with the difficulties they face, but they don't want to be parented anymore. And attempting to be independent is a good thing. When it's so important for them to protect themselves from failure, it's hard to know how you will be able to find a role to help them. These ideas, coming up with a core central theme, and then adjusting that theme to be more specific based upon the intake is what the case plan is intended to do in the initial session plan sections.